My name is Zach Arnold. I'm a Hollywood film and television editor, a documentary director, father of two, an American Ninja Warrior in training, and the creator of Optimize Yourself. For over 10 years now, I have obsessively searched for every possible way to optimize my own creative and athletic performance, and now I'm here to shorten your learning curve. Whether you're a creative professional who edits, writes, or directs, you're an entrepreneur, or even if you're a weekend warrior, I strongly believe that you can be successful without sacrificing your health or your sanity in the process. You ready? Let's design the optimized version of you. Hello and welcome to the Optimize Yourself podcast. If you're a brand new optimizer, I welcome you and I sincerely hope that you enjoy today's conversation. If you are inspired to take action after listening today, why not tell a friend about this show and help spread the love? And if you're a longtime listener and Optimizer OG, welcome back. Whether you're brand new or you're a seasoned vet, if you have just 10 seconds today, it would mean the world to me if you clicked the subscribe button in your podcast app of choice. Because the more people that subscribe, the more that iTunes and the other platforms can recognize this show, and thus the more people that you and I can inspire to step outside their comfort zones to reach their greatest potential. And now on to today's show. Working long and stressful hours is hard enough when you absolutely love the content that you're creating and live for what you do. But how can you survive when you don't even enjoy the work that you do and you have no emotional connection to the stories that you tell? In my opinion, any emotional disconnection from your work coupled with unbearable hours is a recipe for surefire burnout. Trust me, I've been there and done that more times than I can count. Do you find yourself taking a string of paycheck jobs, hoping you can put off your happiness until you reach the next quote-unquote success milestone in your career that's simply based on other people's definition of success and not your own? Or maybe you're stuck busting your butt building your career, but it's at the expense of your well-being, your family, your happiness, and your sanity. Or are you one of the lucky few who has found their calling in life and you can't imagine doing anything else, yet you still struggle to balance your work with the rest of your life? Today's guest, Dr. Ben-Shahar, lends some hope to all of these situations, and he helps guide you on a path to a more fulfilling career that includes being happy. Dr. Shahar is a best-selling author and lecturer who has taught two of the largest classes in Harvard University's history, positive psychology and the psychology of leadership. He is the founder of the Happiness Studies Academy, whose mission is to help educate people about a more holistic approach to happiness. He uses practical strategies from the field of positive psychology to help people align their careers with their values and their ideals so they can stop competing in the never-ending rat race and escape the endless cycle of burnout. In this interview, Tal and I go deep down the rabbit hole of what it means to have success and happiness in your career and whether or not the two are mutually exclusive. And spoiler alert, being happy and having success are not mutually exclusive. It all depends on how you define each for yourself. We discuss the difference between having a job versus a career versus a calling and the practical ways that you can shift your mindset to find fulfillment on any path. If today's interview inspires you to take the next step towards a more fulfilling career path that not only aligns you with projects that you are passionate about, but also includes some semblance of work-life balance, and especially if you would like support, mentorship, and a community to help you turn your goals into a reality, then you and I need to talk. Because in January, I am opening winter enrollment for my Optimizer coaching and mentorship program, and it sounds like you could be the perfect fit. Over the last 3 years, I have now worked with well over 100 students, and I've seen stunning transformations. But the biggest obstacle for most has been that the program in the past was too expensive or it just required too much time. Those problems are no longer an issue as I've made the program a lot more affordable and a lot less time intensive for those with busy lives, but who need an extra push to make whatever the next major transition is in your life. To learn more and apply, visit optimizeyourself.me/optimizer. Just so you know, I review applications in the order that they are received and I fill slots accordingly. So the earlier that you apply, the better your chances are of getting in the program. All right, without further ado, my conversation with best-selling author and lecturer, Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, made possible today by our amazing sponsors, Evercast and ErgoDriven, who are going to be featured just a bit later in today's interview. To access the show notes for this and all previous episodes, as well as to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspirational interview, please visit optimizeyourself.me/podcast. I'm here today with Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, who's a best-selling author and lecturer who taught two of the largest classes in Harvard University's history, positive psychology and the psychology of leadership. And you are also the founder of the Happiness Studies Academy. And in addition, as if all of those things weren't enough, you've also written several books, some of which that have ended up on the New York Times bestseller list, which include Being Happy, Happier, Even Happier, and Choose the Life You Want. So, Tal, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here to discuss things that are related to happiness, fulfillment, the meaning of life, and otherwise. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Great to be here, Zach. Thank you.
So you have a quote that really resonated with me that I want to start with. And the quote that's right on your website is, "Life is too short to do what I'm supposed to do, but it's just long enough to do what I want to do." Expand on that a little bit more. What does that mean? And why is that so important for us to understand?
Time flies, whether you're having fun or not. And we want to make the most of it. And so many of us, even though we have choices in life, we don't make the most of it. Now, I could understand if someone was forced to do certain work, and why? Because they needed to provide for their families. That's understandable. But many people do have choices and they make wrong choices. Now, when I say wrong, I don't mean necessarily wrong financially. I don't mean wrong in terms of their success as traditionally understood, but I mean wrong in the ultimate currency, the currency of happiness. So they forego that currency for another currency. And if you think about it, what is our life about? It is about finding happiness, and not necessarily happiness in, just in terms of pleasure or joy, but happiness in a deep sense, which includes a sense of meaning and purpose in what we do.
And this idea of happiness being a currency seems really ephemeral and very airy-fairy. And what does that even mean? And you're all about science and research and understanding. That's one of the reasons that you're here. And I want to get into all of that specifically because I love systems, and you somehow found a way to turn happiness into a system, which made me think, oh, this is my guy. But before we dive into the specifics, what I would love to know is, what in the world do squash and hamburgers have to do with you finding your purpose and becoming one of the world's foremost experts on happiness?
Yeah, so a lot. The answer is, I was a professional squash player and wasn't particularly happy. I was doing well in squash. I was doing well in school. I was doing well in, again, the quantifiable measurements. However, when it came to happiness, wasn't doing great. And a particular time before a tournament, I was preparing, and I decided to eat especially healthfully. Now, I always ate healthy food, being an athlete, but this was unique. So for a few months, anything that entered my digestive system had to go through very rigorous tests. But there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Now, I said to myself that once the tournament is over, I'm going to binge. I'm going to go to my favorite hamburger store, buy whatever I want to have and just indulge. And I did that. The tournament was over. I went to the hamburger store by myself. This was supposed to be a spiritual experience. I wanted to be there alone. Ordered 4 burgers and sat down, and as soon as I opened my mouth, I closed it again. I didn't want to eat. And it was, and I didn't understand why. It was almost an automatic refusal. And the reason was because my body felt great. I was strong. I was full of energy, and I didn't want to spoil that. And at that moment was born that what I've come to call the hamburger model, later turned into the happiness model from H to H. And the hamburger model, it goes as follows. There are essentially 4 types of burgers that I thought about. And the first one was the one I just turned down, which was delicious, my favorite, however, not very healthy. Another option was one which was perhaps very healthy, but not very tasty. The third option was neither tasty nor healthy. And the fourth option, the ideal option, was both healthy and tasty. And the more I thought about this, I realized that this actually captures 4 archetypes of happiness. So the first archetype would be one where the unhealthy and tasty burger, that would be the hedonist archetype. You enjoy the present. However, for the long term, you won't feel that great about it. Eating 4 burgers would not make me feel great. On the other hand, you have the hamburger that is healthy, that is good for the long term, but you don't enjoy. This is the life of the rat racer. You're always living for the future, not savoring, enjoying the present. The hamburger that's neither healthy nor tasty, well, that's the burger you just don't want to have because it doesn't taste good and it's unhealthy. That would be equivalent to the nihilist, a person who neither enjoys the present nor sees a bright future ahead. And finally, the ideal burger, healthy and tasty, that's happiness. That's when we're doing things that we enjoy doing and we also have future benefit. So it's both present and future benefit. And if you think about it, think about work that you do. If you can find work that is both pleasurable, that you enjoy in the present, and is meaningful, it's something that you're building, you're creating for your future, well, then you're happy in the workplace. Then alternatively, you can just be a hedonist, enjoying the present without the future, a red racer, thinking about the future without the present, or being in the nihilist archetype, which is enjoying neither.
And working in the world of Hollywood, I don't think there is another industry on the planet that's more of an embodiment of the rat race and trying to go towards an end result. We literally have giant gold statues that people hold up on stages that say, "Look, Ma, I'm a success now." And we spend our entire careers going after that. And I think that we assume, well, I'm just going to put in all this work, whether it's miserable, whether it's a toxic work environment, whether it's content that doesn't relate to me. But once I hold that statue, now I've made it and I'm happy. And for me, I try to move people towards fulfillment, because to me, it's so much more about the process and finding meaning. So I want to get more into this idea of happiness and fulfillment, but also talking about something that is fascinating to me, which is what you call the paradox of happiness. So let's talk a little bit about both of those concepts.
Yes. So, Zach, the industry that you're talking about and dedicating yourself to is a very important industry, because so many of the things that we see in the science of happiness, you see in that industry to the extreme. So let me share an example. So let's say you have a person who growing up is not that happy, but their dream is to become a successful actor, a famous actor. And they're unhappy, but they say to themselves, once I make it, when I become that success, then I'll be happy. They go off to Hollywood and they try their luck. And of course, initially they have to wait tables and they have to wait, and they're not happy. In fact, they're miserable, but they say to themselves, once I make it, then I'll be happy. And then fortune strikes and they make it, and they make it big. And it's an almost, or at least it seems like an almost overnight success. And they become famous and they become very wealthy. And suddenly they have it all. Everything that they dreamed of has come true. They have more money than they know what to do with. They are desired by men and women, and they feel wanted and very happy. And finally, they say, everything was worth it. I've made it. But here is what happens. Inevitably, within 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, they go back to where they were before. And they're unhappy. And perhaps they're anxious or depressed or sad, like they were before. In other words, they enjoyed a temporary spike in their well-being, not a permanent one. They go back to where they were before. However, this time they're in a much worse place. Why? Because at least before, they had the illusion that once they make it, then they'll be happy. Now they're disillusioned. They no longer have it. And what happens? They fall into depression Why? Because the difference between sadness and depression is that depression is sadness without hope. They have no hope now. They have not found the answer in reality. So very often they look for the answers outside of reality. How do you exit reality? Well, there are a few ways. One is through alcohol. Another is through drugs. And the ultimate exit from reality is suicide. Now, this is really unfortunate. And the cause of this depression, unhappiness, the cause of this desire to exit reality is a misunderstanding of the nature of happiness, of where we gain happiness. We do not get happiness through achievements. Happiness does not come our way when we attain a goal. Yes, temporary high, but not more than that.
So I've seen the documentary, The Secret, and I know that the way to be happy is to create a vision board and just have all of these positive affirmations, and I just believe it's going to happen, and I put it out into the universe. That's all it takes, right?
I wish. I was there too. I read the books. I watched the movie, and that's what they promise. However, this is over-promising and under-delivering. Now, this doesn't mean that there isn't a grain of truth in The Secret. Yes, we know that when we believe that something will happen, it's more likely to happen. So beliefs sometimes become self-fulfilling prophecies. However, that's only part of the equation. The other part of the equation is that hard work is essential, absolutely essential. Another part of the equation is that failure must be part of success. There is no other way. In fact, what we know today is that people who succeed too quickly without failing enough initially, they will not be successful in the long term. Not only that, they'll be very unhappy in the long term. So, many people say, oh, he, she, they were so lucky because they succeeded at a young age or so quickly. It's actually a curse in disguise.
So this is something that I can relate to very, very well. And not to go too deep into my story, because my audience may have heard it, but you haven't. And I want you to help unpack this for some of the other people listening. I too had a quote unquote overnight success story where I came into the world of entertainment in Hollywood right out of college, started climbing the ranks as an editor. And within about 10 to 12 years, I was editing the #1 show on television at the time, which was Empire, which was breaking all kinds of rating records and was a cultural phenomenon. And I knew for a fact while I was editing the season 1 finale that about 25 million people were going to see what I was doing in my small dark room. And that's what it was all about, right? And at the same time, I hadn't seen my children for months, who were very young at the time, I believe maybe 5 and 2 or 5 and 3 years old. And I was putting them to bed via FaceTime every single night. And there was one specific instance where I remember that my son, who was about 5 years old, and my wife was doing the call with them, they thought they had hung up and they hadn't. And my son asked my wife, why doesn't daddy want to be home with us at night? Why doesn't he love us? And that was it. That was a moment when I realized, like you said, I thought I reached the pinnacle and I'd expected something more from it, but the work I'm doing is not fulfilling to me. Because I thought this was what happiness was. I climbed the ranks. Now I can go to parties. I can say I work on the #1 show on TV. 25 million people are seeing all the decisions that I'm making in the room. I thought that's what it was all about. And I realized it really wasn't. And that was a major smack in the face. But it ultimately was necessary to lead to the path that I'm on now. And I feel like this leads perfectly into the conversation about the paradox of happiness, where pursuing happiness actually gets you further away from it. And this idea that it's about failure just doesn't equate. Well, what do you mean? How can I be happy if I'm failing? So let's talk about these two ideas.
Yeah, so let me begin with the paradox of happiness. So this is research done by Iris Moss and others. And what they essentially show is that people who wake up in the morning and say to themselves, happiness is important for me. It's a core value. I want to be happy. I'm pursuing happiness. They're actually less happy. And that poses a real problem because on the one hand, there's a lot of research showing that happiness is good for us. People who are happier are more successful. They're more creative. They're more productive. They have better relationships. They're physically healthier. They actually live longer, all other things being equal. So everything tells us from the research and what we're told, happiness is a good thing beyond the fact that it feels good to feel good. So of course I want to be happy. But then on the other hand, that research says, well, but if you pursue happiness, if you really want to be happy, if it's an important value for you, you'll be less happy. So how do you resolve this? One way to do it is to fool ourselves and to say, well, I don't really want to be happy, wink, wink, but that probably won't work. What's the solution? How do we resolve it? What we do is we pursue happiness indirectly. Let me explain this through a metaphor. Think about sunlight. If you look at the sunlight directly, you'll get burned. You'll tear up. It's unpleasant. It's painful. So what do? You break down sunlight. You use prism, for example, and then you break it down into its colors, the colors of the rainbow. And then you can observe the indirect impact of sunlight. Observe it, enjoy it, savor it. The same with happiness. What we need to do with happiness is break it down into its elements, into its metaphorical colors of the rainbow. And then we can pursue those colors of the rainbow, which is pursuing happiness indirectly. Now, the question is, and again, the question for the science of happiness, what are these colors? What are the elements that make up happiness? And these are things like relationships. Actually, the number one predictor of happiness. Zach, you talked about your relationship with your sons and with your wife. Number one predictor of happiness. It could be with friends. It could be with colleagues. It actually doesn't matter. We need relationships. It means focusing on physical well-being as well. That's another important element of a happy life. Regular physical exercise has the same impact on our psychological well-being as our most powerful psychiatric medication. Nutrition, of course, matters. Then there is also emotional well-being, cultivating pleasurable emotions, embracing painful emotions as part and parcel of every life. There is also learning, whether it's learning by listening to podcasts or whether it's learning by reading books or walking in nature and exploring. We are also, as Aristotle said, rational animals. We need to indulge our intellectual faculty. And then there is also the element of meaning, meaning and purpose, which is a very important element of happiness. So if I wake up in the morning and say to myself, I'm going to do work that is meaningful, I'm indirectly pursuing happiness. If I say to myself, okay, today I'm going to work out, that's indirectly pursuing happiness. If I spend quality time with my 3-year-old, 5-year-old, with my BFF, that's indirectly pursuing happiness.
And the reason that I love this so much, like I alluded to in the beginning, is I love systems. I love breaking things down in their component parts. And rather than thinking, God, I'm so unhappy, I need to be a happier person, I'm just miserable, or I'm depressed, or I'm burned out, all things I've experienced a multitude of times in my career. Instead, what I love about your system is I could put happiness on my calendar. I love that I can put a workout on my calendar and say that's currency that's going to increase my level of happiness. Or I can put work on my calendar that fulfills me as opposed to it's just the rat race trying to find a paycheck. Or I have a dinner with family, maybe not, in the COVID era, but a dinner with family or whatever kind of interaction it might be. That's me putting happiness on the calendar, and it's a spectrum as opposed to binary. Either I'm a happy person or I'm an unhappy person. Right?
Yeah, Zach, it's spot on a few levels. So first of all, let me begin with where you ended. Many people today ask me, so Tal, you've been in this field for 30 years. Are you finally happy? Because they know that I got into this field because I was unhappy. And my answer to that is, I don't know how to answer this question because I don't think there is a point before which you are unhappy, after which you are happy. Rather, I see happiness residing on a continuum. And yes, today I'm certainly happier, a lot happier than I was 30 years ago when I embarked on this journey. At the same time, I hope that 5 years from now, I'll be happier than I am today. And that goes to your point. How do we do that? How do we increase happiness levels? And it's not just that we can put things on our calendar. We have to put things into our calendar. We have to create rituals in our lives. And just like we have an appointment with our boss or with a colleague or with a client, we need to have appointments with ourselves. And that could be an appointment to go work out or an appointment where we dedicate time to being with our loved ones, or a time when we express gratitude for all that we have, as Oprah urges us to do.
And it's funny that you said that happiness is the ultimate currency, because when you said that, I've said something very similar with my students in my program, but I say time is the ultimate currency, because time is the currency that allows you to buy happiness within your framework, so to speak. So I've had conversations with Cal Newport, with James Clear, with Nir Eyal, talking about the value of time and really putting your focus and your intention into one activity. That's something that I talk about extensively in my other programs and podcasts, but I want to talk about the neuroscience of how being in a state of flow and having fulfillment and connection to your work is an indirect way to get closer to happiness.
Yeah. Daniel Goleman talks about our age being the age of distraction, because we are all over the place. And what we need to do, instead of continuing to multitask, we need to single task. Let me share with you a study which actually relates to your personal story in some way, because it has to do with parents and children. So this was conducted. It's a joint project. The lead author was Daniel Kahneman, who was a Princeton psychologist, Nobel Prize winner in economics. And what they essentially did, he and his colleagues, was they went to women from both the United States, North America, and from Europe, professional women, and they asked them to evaluate their lives as a whole. So basically to evaluate emotionally how they were doing within different domains. For example, how do you feel when you're at work, or when you're with your best friend, or with your partner, or with your children, or when you're shopping or doing, housework? And they evaluated their entire days. And what they found, the most surprising result of this study, was that these women did not particularly enjoy spending time with their children. Now, that was surprising, because when they asked them in terms of, how much do they love their children, how meaningful their children there are, of course, they were, the highest score possible. They loved the children to a great extent. However, they did not enjoy spending time with them. Why? Why? Because when these women were with their children, they were not really with their children, meaning they were physically there, but at the same time, they were perhaps on the phone or emailing or thinking about what they did earlier at work or what they have to do later at home, and on and on. And this is a very important finding, especially for today's world. Think about the following analogy. Let's say you're listening to your favorite piece of music. And if your favorite piece of music is like mine, you're listening to Whitney Houston's "And I Will Always Love You."
Oh, yes. You know me so well. That was definitely the one I would have said.
My favorite song of all time. So you're listening to whatever your favorite is. I'm not judging here. You're listening to it, eyes closed. And then afterwards, you're asked to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. Given that it's your favorite, you give it a 10. And then you're asked to listen to your second most favorite piece of music. And if your second most favorite is like mine, you're listening to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony.
That was my number one.
Okay. Eyes closed. And afterwards, you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. And what do you give it? Well, I give it a 9.5 because, Beethoven is good, but he's not quite Whitney Houston, you must admit. And then for the optimal experience, you take these two pieces of music and you play them together. What do you get? 19.5? No, not a 10, not even a 5. That's cacophony. It's noise. And that's modern life for you. So many people come to me, Zach, I can't tell you, so many people over the years have said to me, Tal, why aren't I happy? They ask about themselves. I have everything that I've ever wanted. I have work that I like. I have, family or friends. I have all these hobbies, and they actually list their hobbies. Why aren't I happy? And my answer is, for the same reason that you would not be happy listening to Whitney Houston and Beethoven simultaneously, because there can be too much of a good thing, because quantity of experiences affects quality of experiences. And what we need to do is simplify, do less rather than more. So when we're with our kids, we're just with our kids. When we're with our best friend, just be with that best friend, not while the phone is on and doing other work. And when I am working, then just do the work, single task rather than multitask. Now, it's not possible to single task 24/7, just not realistic. However, even if we have an hour, two, if we can, 3 hours a day of single tasking, if we have these, what I've come to call islands of sanity throughout our day, then we're doing well. Then our happiness levels will increase significantly, because that's when we can immerse ourselves. That's when our brains are functioning at their peak. We're experiencing, in the words of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who coined the term flow, we're experiencing both peak experience, we enjoy ourselves, and peak performance, we're at our best.
So what we've established is that getting into a state of flow or intentionality or single tasking is one of these indirect ways that we can increase our happiness and feel more pleasure, as well as just feel more fulfilled and more content. And what I want to dig into deeper is specifically that emotional connection to your work. Because a big thing that I've experienced many times that I know is rampant in my industry and many others is my process day to day doesn't really change. I'm in front of a computer, I have bins worth of footage, I have information, I put it all together and I tell a story. But depending on the level of emotional involvement or engagement I have in the story that I want to tell and the emotions that I'm conveying, I will either love my job and the time of the day just disappears. And I'm like, oh my God, where did it even go? That was awesome. Versus I can't do this another day and I'm miserable, even though the job is the same. And you've talked about how people that are creative, our job is to help other people in the world understand and process both pleasurable and good emotions through our stories, through movies, through television, through music, through all these things. So why is it so hard for me to do work that I just don't want to do, even though the process is the same?
Zach, I want to talk about two big ideas here and then delve deeper. The first big idea is that reality comprises object and subject. In other words, my reality depends on what's out there, as well as my interpretation of what's out there, the object and the subject. So that's one big idea. The second big idea is Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, distinguishes between the meaning of life and the meaning in life. So the meaning of life is, why am I here? What's my ultimate purpose? The meaning in life is, can I experience a sense of meaning and purpose in what I'm doing right now, independent of whether I think there is an ultimate cause or purpose to life. So given these 2 points, subject and object, and meaning in life and meaning of life, let me share a study which made a very big difference in my life, and I know in the lives of many of my clients, students, and many others. This was conducted by Amy Wisniewski and Jane Dutton. Their work, initially Michigan, Wisniewski then went over to Yale, revolved around work orientation. And what they identified were essentially 3 ways of experiencing or seeing, perceiving our work. The first way is work as a job. Work as a job is about work that I have to do. I have no choice about it. Why do I have to do it? Because I have to provide for my family, send money home if my family is elsewhere, just survive. I have no choice. It's a chore. What am I looking forward to if it's a job? I'm looking forward to the end of the day or shift, or to the weekend, TGIF, or to retirement when I will no longer need to do this job. So this is work as a job. Then there are people who see their work primarily as a career. What's a career? Career is about the rat race. It's about progress. It's about making it to the next stage. It's about making more money. It's about being more successful, getting more prestige. What I'm looking forward to is the raise, the advancement, or whatever lies ahead. That's work as a career. And then there are people who see their work as a calling. Seeing our work as a calling is about experiencing a sense of purpose in our lives. It's about our work being meaningful, important, significant. It's about us being passionate about what we do. What do we look forward to in our work when we experience as a calling? We look forward to more work. TGIM. Thank God it's Monday. Now, all of us have job days. All of us have career days, and all of us have calling days. The question is, which is the dominant orientation? And it turns out that it makes a very big difference. And it also turns out that regardless of what we do, with almost no exceptions, there are some extreme exceptions, but almost with no exception, regardless of what we do, we can find a sense of meaning and purpose in our work. Amy Wisniewski and Jen Dutton showed, for example, hospital janitors who saw their work as a job, cleaning the toilets and changing bed sheets. Then there were janitors who saw their work as a career, doing the same thing, but they wanted to progress. And then there were janitors doing the exact same thing, cleaning toilets, changing bed sheets, who saw their work as a calling. They were enabling the work of the doctors and nurses. They were helping the patients get better, heal. In those very same hospitals, there were nurses and doctors who saw their work as a job. Let this day just be over. Or as a career, I want to become the chief doctor or the head nurse or whatever it is. Or as a calling, this is what I'm meant to do with my life. It reminds me, my business partner, Angus Ridgway, he's British with a British sense of humor. So one day he was having lunch with his brother-in-law. Now, his brother-in-law is a cardiologist, and his specialty is pacemakers. So what he does is put pacemakers by people's heart, and then every few years he takes the pacemaker out, changes the batteries, and puts it back in. That's his specialty. So Angus was having lunch with him one day. Suddenly he says to his brother-in-law, he says, I finally figured out what you do for a living. So his brother-in-law curiously asks, what is it? And Angus said, what you do is you change batteries. Now, his brother-in-law didn't even smile. He looks at him intently and says, Angus, you're right. Some days I change batteries. Other days I save lives. And this is the distinction between a job or a calling. And the thing is, all of us have that ability, because remember, reality is not just the object, not just what we do. It's also how we interpret what we do. If I edit films, I can say, okay, well, I'm going to do it again, use the program that I use every day. I can do it with my almost eyes closed. Or I say, what I do now can lead millions and millions of people to experience more joy in their lives, to have special moments in their families as they're watching this together. What I'm doing now also is what's providing for my dear family that I love so much. There are so many ways that we can recraft our work, reorient ourselves to see what is meaningful and important in what we do. And people who routinely do that are not just happier. Not surprisingly, they're also more successful in the traditional sense of the word. They have much more energy. Now, does this mean that they never have their job days? Of course they do. I have my job days too, when I just, don't want to get out of bed in the morning. However, the question is, how can you increase the calling to career or calling to job ratio in your life?
My sincerest apologies for the interruption in the middle of this interview, but if you are a content creator or you work in the entertainment industry, not only is the following promo not an interruption, but listening has the potential to change your life, because collaborating with Evercast is that powerful. Here's a brief excerpt from a recent interview that I did with Evercast co-founders Brad Thomas and award-winning editor Roger Barton.
Living this lifestyle of a feature film editor has really had an impact on me. So I was really looking for something to push back against all of these lifestyle infringements that are imposed on us. both by schedules and expectations. When you guys demoed Evercast for me that first time, my jaw hit the floor. I'm like, oh my God, this is what I have been waiting for a decade.
I also had the same reaction when I first saw Evercast. 2 words came to mind: game changer.
Our goal, honestly, is to become the Zoom for creatives, whatever it is you're streaming, whether it's editorial, visual effects, Pro Tools for music composition, live shot cameras. It's consistent, audio and video, lip sync, always stays in sync. Whether you're in a live session where you're getting that feedback immediately, or you can't get it immediately, so you record the session and you can share those clips with people on the production team where there's no room for any confusion. It's like, this is exactly what the director wants. This is exactly what the producer wants.
What matters most to me is it makes the entire process more efficient, which then translates to us as creatives who spend way too much time in front of computers. We get to shut it down and we get to go spend time with our friends and family.
The biggest complaint, and I'm sure you guys have heard this many, many times, this looks amazing, I just can't afford it.
Tesla had to release the Model S before they released the Model 3. So by the end of the year, we are going to be releasing a sub $200 version a month of Evercast for the freelancer and indie creatives. Anyone who is a professional video creator outside of Hollywood.
I think what we've learned over the last few months is that this technology can translate to better lives for all of us that give us more flexibility and control while still maintaining the creativity, the creative momentum, and the quality of work.
I cannot stress this enough. Evercast is changing the way that we collaborate. If you value your craft, your well-being, and spending quality time with the ones you love, Evercast now makes that possible for you and me. To listen to the full interview and learn about the amazing potential that Evercast has to change the way that you work and live, visit optimizeyourself.me/Evercast. Now back to today's interview. It's really all about perception, and that's something that it took me a long time to figure that out, but one of the quotes that I've heard in many of the readings and learnings and courses that I've done that at first didn't really click and make sense, but then all of a sudden it was a giant aha moment. It's not that success leads to happiness. It's that happiness leads to success, and it's all about perception. And even though I had not heard of that study, I'm definitely going to look into it, but I have a very similar framework that I share with my students where I've actually identified 4 kinds of jobs. Very similar to what you said. There's the paycheck job, which is I just show up and I get the money and I go home. And then there's the career job, which is I'm busting my hump and maybe I'm getting another credit on the resume, but I'm working long hours, I'm burned out, toxic work environment, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's the dream job, which is very similar to having the calling. The 4th one that I've inserted in there is the lifestyle job, where yeah, I'm getting paid well. Maybe I don't work that many hours, but God, I'm just bored. I have no connection to the work that I do. And to me, the dream job is when you feel like it's a calling, you are getting paid what you're worth, yet you're asking, are they really paying me to do this? I would do this for free, right? But it's all about perception. And like you said, 3 different janitors doing the same jobs can have different levels of happiness based on their perception of the work that they do. And I want to give people some practical steps and things they can think about. And I know that one of them that might be helpful is this idea of setting what's called a self-concordant goal. So how can we do that to get closer to identifying what is my calling? So when I'm at work, I'm thinking to myself, God, are they paying me? I would do this for free.
So, there are a few ways to identify. The most important thing, of course, is to raise our levels of awareness in terms of what is it that will provide me a sense of meaning and calling. Now, how do we identify it? One way to identify it is to start by looking at our past experiences. So asking a question such as, when did I last experience a real sense of meaning and purpose in what I do? When did I have periods in my life when I experienced a lot of flow? When I was immersed in whatever it is that I was doing. In other words, it's about learning from past experiences, learning from the best past experiences. And then after that, the next question is, okay, so what do I want to do now with my life? What are, in psychological terms, what are self-concordant goals for me? Goals that are aligned with my values, goals that are aligned with my passions, goals that are also aligned with my strengths, things that I can do well. In my book Happier, I introduce a model which I call the MPS model, which is about finding meaning, pleasure, and strength. And the first question is, what is meaningful to me? What is important to me? What's significant? The second question is, what's pleasurable to me? What do I enjoy doing? What do I do when I think I can't believe they're paying me for that in your language? And the third question is, what are my strengths? What am I good at? And finding our self-concordant goals, the goals that will ultimately lead to most happiness, both in terms of the process and outcome. It's about finding the overlap, something that is meaningful, pleasurable, and that I'm good at. And, let me quickly share with you a personal example. So, think about music. So music gives me a great deal of pleasure. I really enjoy listening to music, whether it's classical music, whether it's 60s music, whether it's first and foremost Whitney Houston. It's also very meaningful to me. I think of my favorite author, Marianne Evans, aka George Eliot. She said that if I had music in my life, I would have no other mortal need. She said this back in 1860. So I relate to that. At the same time, you don't want to hear me sing. Not my strength. And hence, I do spend a lot of time listening to music, but I did not choose that as my calling, as my career. On the other hand, writing. Writing is very meaningful to me. On most days, not all days, but most days, I really enjoy it, and I'm good at it. So this is why I chose that as my calling, as my self-concordant goal. And we can do that with everything that we do in life and identify the overlap. Because when we identify the overlap, these are the places where we're most likely to thrive, flourish, experience most flow, enjoy peak performance and peak experience.
Well, there's an author that's also one of my mentors. His name is Ramit Sethi. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not, but he talks about this idea of how it's a mistake to simply, quote unquote, follow your passion. Just find your passion and you're going to be, blissful in life and you're going to find your happiness. And like you said, if you followed your passion, you would become a musician because you're passionate about music. But clearly that's not in alignment with these other areas. So you have to find something, like you said, where you also have a strength.
Yes, it has to be the combination, because remember, reality is about subject and object. And there are certain objective, there is an objective reality. And in that objective reality, I don't think people are going to pay to hear me sing.
One of the things that I talk about so much in my program, and is probably the cornerstone of where all of this started years ago, comes down to a single word, which is burnout. Burnout is a manifestation of anxiety, depression, all these other things. And I am not a scientist, nor a researcher, nor an academic, but I've had a hypothesis. And I want to get your professional opinion on this hypothesis. I firmly believe that burnout is largely at its core created by a lack of setting proper expectations, whether it's expectations, what I can actually do for others, what I can do for myself, the amount of time that I allot to accomplish things, but more importantly, the expectation that I'm supposed to be doing this thing and I'm supposed to enjoy it because that's what everybody else tells me to. Would you say that's a relatively accurate hypothesis?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up expectations. If, people have asked me, and what have you learned over the last 30 years? Or how is your understanding of happiness different today than it was 30 years ago or 15 years ago? And the main answer for me, there are different things that I learned, new research that came out, but the main thing for me, the biggest learning, was around expectations. So if we were speaking 15 years ago, I would have said to you, listen, Zach, expectations, most important. Look at all the research that talks about beliefs as self-fulfilling prophecies. If you have high expectations, you're more likely to reach them. And I would have essentially advocated expectations, period. Today, I have a much more nuanced understanding of the role of expectations, which very much relates to what you were talking about. When it comes to success, high expectations is important. We know that. We know that having high expectations in terms of your success professionally, you're more likely to do well. Athletes, high expectations, they're more likely to succeed. However, not so when it comes to happiness. Let me give you two examples. So the first example is, let's say my expectation is that after I learn all this, science of happiness thing and become an expert here, I will be happy all the time. if this is my expectation, which by the way was my expectation when I embarked on the journey, you are inevitably going to be disappointed because every person, no exception, experiences sadness and anger and envy and hatred and disappointment and anxiety. These are all natural human emotions, and we experience them just as night follows day. And if my expectations is that my life will be exempt from these states, I'm in for significant major disappointment. Not only that, when I do experience sadness and reject that sadness, then that sadness is only going to intensify, grow stronger. Same for anxiety or envy or anger. So having realistic expectations rather than unrealistic, perfect expectations, that's very important. Let me give you another example. This is from relationships. So, we're standing at the altar or whatever, committing to one another. And at that point, we are certain that we're going to be living happily ever after. That is going to be this constant honeymoon. Wrong. Maybe in the movies, it looks like that's what's going to happen. But the thing is that movies end usually where love begins. And in every relationship, even the best of them, there are wonderful moments and there are very difficult moments. There are conflicts and disagreements and gridlocks and lows in addition to the highs. So if my expectation is that we'll be happy all the time, I'm bound to be disappointed. One of the reasons why so many relationships burn is because of unrealistic expectations. Now, these unrealistic expectations put a lot of stress on our system. And this is where it's connected to burnout. When we put a lot of stress on the system, what happens? It burns. Whether you're talking about an engine or whether you're talking about a human being. The most important thing to understand about stress and consequently burnout is that stress in and of itself is not the problem. That potentially stress is even good for us. How is that? You go to the gym and you lift weights. You're stressing your muscles. Not a bad thing. You lift them again and 2 days later you go back to the gym again and you actually grow stronger as a result of the stress. The problem in the gym begins when you go to the gym and then you go again and again and a minute later again and again. And that's when you get injured. That's when you get enervated, weaker rather than stronger, energized. So the same psychologically, the problem is not the stress itself. The problem is when we don't have recovery. And when we don't have recovery, that's when we burn out. That's when we get psychologically injured. So punctuating our lives with periods of recovery, which is very much associated with having realistic expectations. Because if I have unrealistic expectations, I don't have time for recovery. I don't have time to lose ground. I have to lead a perfect life where I'm working 24/7, where I'm succeeding at every juncture. And that's a prescription for overstress, for burnout.
The final place that I want to go that I think is so important to tie all of this together that has so much to do with expectations is if you are somebody listening to this and you're thinking, you know what? I am just doing the paycheck job. I didn't even realize it, but I have no connection to my work. The burnout makes so much more sense, but I don't know how to set proper expectations for the jobs I really want to do. Then that's where I tell them you have to reach out to people and you have to find your version of an expert or a mentor. And they'll just reach out to some random colleagues or somebody else doing something that, maybe they're interested in. I'm a big believer in that. I want to learn from the best in the world. If I want to learn something specific, who's the best on the planet at doing it? When it comes to behavioral psychology, Adam Grant, he's my spirit animal. I love that guy. When it comes to happiness, I set up a call with you, my fitness mentor, because I decided at the age of 40, I want to become an American Ninja Warrior. My fitness mentor is Tony Horton, creator of the P90X exercise program. I want to learn from the best. So talk to me a little bit more about how this relates to this idea of focusing on what works in the field of positive psychology and why, even though it might be more difficult, I should really find the right people doing exactly what I want to do.
When I recommend books to people, I always say the best self-help books are biographies, good, solid biographies. Why? Because when you read biographies of successful people, and again, whether it's in coaching or whether it's in computers or whatever it is, you're learning from them. They are your role models. And then you can assimilate, internalize their practices. What did Bill Gates do on his way, or Steve Jobs? What did they do on their way to the top? What did Michael Jordan do? What can you learn from him? If basketball is your thing, or LeBron. And when you learn from them and apply that knowledge in your life, you can fulfill your potential. Now, it's not just one person. Fortunately, today we have access to many very successful basketball players and many great coaches. You have the autobiography of Michael Jordan, but you also have the autobiography of Phil Jackson that you can also learn from. When it comes to computer science, or to technology, you have the fantastic biography of Steve Jobs, and you have the biography of Michael Dell. So you can learn from different people how to fulfill your potential. There are 3 elements to fulfilling our potential. One is to learn from the best, as you point out. The second is to learn from yourself. So it's not just about research, looking outside, it's also about me-search. So learning from your best experiences, this is why I emphasized earlier. So when did I experience meaning in my work? When did I play my best game as a squash player or as a basketball player? What did I do differently in terms of my preparation, in terms of the mindset? So you can learn a lot from your best experiences. And after you learn from other people's best experiences, and again, we can also do it obviously with a coach or by learning about them or from them directly. After you learn from your experience, then it's all about applying what you learn. And this is, the Anders Ericsson idea of peak, where he talks about the 10,000 hours you need to put in the work. And this is also where I take issue with a lot of the self-help literature that says, just think and you'll grow rich. Whatever your mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. It's part of the equation. It's not all of the equation. You also need to engage in real learning from the best. You need to engage in real learning from the best within yourself. And you need to put in the hours.
I'm all about putting in the work. That's my thing. Is anybody that works with me, they know that I'm going to put in the hours. I'm going to push them outside their comfort zone. And so many people, especially in Hollywood, will say, well, there's no path to success. If I want to be an academic, there are certain steps that you take, papers that you write, classes that you take. If I want to be a doctor, if I want to be a lawyer, I can tell you how to be a doctor in 5 minutes on Google. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's simple. I know the steps. In Hollywood and creative industries, there is no path. And I say, of course there is. You're not the first person that's ever tried to do this. Success leaves clues. It has a recipe. Find somebody else that's already used that recipe that's doing exactly what it is that you want to do. And if you're really connecting with deeper, fulfilling meaning, my guess is they're doing it for the same reason. You automatically have something in common. But to think that there's nobody else out there that's doing exactly where you want to go next, no, just do your research, reach out, find the best that's doing what you want to do.
Yeah, there's very important work by Richard Snyder, the late positive psychologist, on hope. And he talks about hope in a scientific way, because very often we associate hope with religion or even with mysticism. Well, he broke it down to its 2 key elements. The first key element of hope that he talks about is what he calls willpower. And willpower is what we mostly talk about when we say, okay, yes, I can do it. And, yes, you can, as a mantra. And willpower is important. However, there's another element. And that element he calls way power. And way power sounds like this. Okay, I'm going in this direction. If that doesn't work, then I'm going to go in this direction. Oh, and if B doesn't work, then I'm going to go to C, and on and on. So finding alternative ways of getting to your destination. Now, if you read biographies or if you interview Different people, you have many pathways, many ways to get to wherever you want to get to. In other words, they provide you alternatives. In other words, they provide you way power, in addition to the willpower that you presumably have. I remember watching Serena Williams playing, I believe it was in Wimbledon, and she had just won a match where she was supposed to lose. I mean, she was a set down and a few games down. And as she has done a number of times throughout her illustrious career, she came back. And the interviewer asked her, how did you do that? Or how do you do that? Because again, not the first time. This is no fluke. And she said, look, when I go on court, I always have a plan, a game plan. That's plan A. If plan A doesn't work, I go to plan B. If plan B doesn't work, I go to plan C. If plan C doesn't work, I go to plan D. She said, you understand what I'm talking about, right? You got the drift. This is what she does. And, obviously Serena and other great athletes have willpower. One of the things that distinguishes the greatest from the rest is they also have way power, alternatives.
And I think that the other thing I want to extract from this that's so important, that delineates some of the most successful people from those that aren't, is the amount of times that they've failed. So what I heard was that plan A failed, so plan B failed, and then plan C failed, but we're so afraid of failure. And if you talk about biographies, like, it's so funny that you brought up the Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan thing, because I've been watching The Last Dance on Netflix. I could give two craps about basketball. I just don't like the sport, but it's fascinating to understand the mindset of success. And if you look at certain statistics, Michael Jordan is the biggest failure in the history of the sport. But in that specific context, right? Same thing with Thomas Edison. He failed more than any inventor in history. And when people ask me, how did you get where you are? I said, because I'm really good at failing as fast as possible. I jump right in, I fail, I learn, I iterate, and I find another plan. But you have to get over that fear of failure. And if you think, I have to choose this job, it's got to be the right one, and I got to make the right choice, try it. Maybe it's not your calling. That's fine. So you failed at that. You gathered information. Find another one, try something else. You get to create your own unique path.
Yeah, Zach, this is music to my ears, I must say. When I teach about this topic, I always begin the class by saying to the students the following. I say, look, full disclosure here. I have two objectives for this class. My first objective is that you fail more. I don't think you fail enough. My second objective is that you not only fail more, you also embrace failure. So the mantra that I repeat over and over again, whether it's as part of that class or whether it's to my kids and to myself and clients, is learn to fail or fail to learn. Learn to fail or fail to learn. And you see the most successful people in history, whether it's the Michael Jordans of the world or the Babe Ruths of the world, or the Anita Roddick, the founder of The Body Shop, or Thomas Edison, as you mentioned, or the greatest artists in the world. This is research on scientists and artists by Dean Simonton from UC Davis. They are also the people who had failed the most times. It's no coincidence. They certainly deserve a place in the Hall of Fame of success and the Hall of Fame of failure.
And just to wrap this up, going back to something we talked about much earlier, I put failure on my calendar. I can tell you right now that from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Sundays, I've got a whole lot of failure coming up, because that's when I do my big ninja training for the week with my mentor. I'm just going to fail over and over and over. But every week when I go back, I fail a little bit less than I did the week before. So I've never reached the pinnacle of success, and I can say, I'm now strong. I'm now in shape. I've made it. It's more, you know what? I sucked a little bit less than I did last week. I'm happy with that. I think I'm going to go back the next week. And it's the same thing with my work, with writing, with podcasting. I'll listen to this podcast at some point and say, you know what? I did a great job, but I could have said this question differently, or I stumbled on my words. So I want to do it a little bit better the next time. But I didn't think, I don't know if I'm ready to talk to Tal. Like he's a big name in his field, and who am I? I better wait until I'm better. Like, you know what? If I fail, I learn and I do it again. To me, it's all about iteration. And to me, the process of doing that makes this so much more fun than focusing on the outcome.
Yeah, it's that, and it's also more fun because we take a big load of our shoulders. It's very weighty to think I can't afford to fail, or I have to do this perfectly. By the way, this especially applies to the creative arts. It's very difficult to be creative without the permission to fail.
And as a creative, I spent all day long getting pages and pages telling me all of my failures. We call them notes. Here are all the things that don't work. And you're like, but I believed in that those are my ideas. Like, I'm just basically told 150 times a day, 10 pages worth, here are all the places where you failed as an artist. And it's so hard at first to not take that personally, but then you realize I'm just here to collaborate, tell the story better, work with great people. And again, if it's attached to more feeling like it's a calling, I'm not worried about the details, right? But when you're burned out and you're not attached to it, you just take all that stuff personally and it just keeps digging in, which is why I wanted to have this conversation with you today, is I wanted people to better understand how can I pursue more fulfilling, meaningful work that I feel it is a calling, because I think that's really the biggest contributor to burnout. Yes, it's hours and it's eating poorly and it's not sleeping well enough, but I've eaten poorly and not exercised and not slept very well on jobs that I loved, and I was exhausted, but I wasn't burned out, because I felt connected to it and it was meaningful. And yeah, I needed to catch up on some sleep and maybe I felt like crap for a week, but it also felt like it was worth it, as opposed to why am I doing this every day? And that's why I wanted to have this conversation. I've barely just gotten started. You and I could talk for another 3 hours so easily, but I want to be very respectful of your time. So before we go, I want to know a little bit more about your Happiness Studies Academy, because you're one of the first, if not the first person to say, why is this not something that we can be accredited in, no different than biology or chemistry or anything else?
Yeah. So Zach, this idea came to me, I think it was just over 5 years ago when I was on a flight. A question came to mind, and the question was, how is it that there is a field of study for psychology, which is my field, or film studies, or history, or biology, or medicine, or you name it, and there is no field of study for happiness? Yeah, there is positive psychology, but that's just the psychology of happiness. What about what philosophers have to say about happiness? What about what sociologists and economists and theologians? What about what great movies have to say about happiness? Why isn't there a field, or rather an interdisciplinary field of study that brings together what all these respective disciplines have to say about the good life? And on that flight, I resolved to help create a field of happiness studies. And this is what my colleagues and I have been working on for the past 5 years. And we co-founded the Happiness Studies Academy, where we offer a certificate program in happiness studies. Soon there will be a university degree, a master's degree in happiness studies. And we essentially address two questions there. The first question is, how can I, as the student participant, how can I become happier? And the second question, how can I help others become happier? And it's not just a solipsistic question. It's not just a question that focuses on the self, because we know when we increase levels of happiness, generosity and kindness go up, relationships improve, we become healthier, we become more creative. So we pursue happiness as an end in itself, and also as a means towards other valuable ends.
So if I'm interested in becoming a student of yours and I want to immerse myself in this, where would I learn more and become a part of this?
So our website is happinessstudies.academy. And we'd love to see you there. You know, we're very passionate about our work. So many of our students are very passionate about indirectly pursuing happiness and helping others do the same.
And I understand you're also very generous with a coupon code as well.
Yes, indeed. And we'll do almost anything. Just come, just join us.
You just want to make us happy, right?
Yeah.
So one last quick thing. That's a big investment to become happier. Give me one really simple thing I can do as soon as I get off the call by the time I go to bed tonight to make myself just a tiny bit happier by tomorrow.
How about 3, Zach? Is that okay?
Sure, I'll take it. Let's do it.
Short ones. First thing, give yourself the permission to be human. Accept painful emotions. Accept the fact that things are not going well if they're not going well. Paradoxically, it's the first step towards happiness is allowing in unhappiness. So that's the first one. The second one, spend quality time with people you care about and who care about you. And when I say quality time, it means single tasking. Just be with them. And even if it's 10 extra minutes of that can go a long way. Part of the second one is also be generous, be kind, give. One of the best ways to increase levels of happiness, to improve relationships, is through generosity. And this, of course, relates to the work of Adam Grant, whom you mentioned earlier. And the third thing, again, do what Oprah has been telling us to do for so many years. Express gratitude, savor what you have, whether it's in writing, whether it's visualizing and being grateful for what you have. Appreciate it, because when we appreciate the good in our lives, the good appreciates. We have more of it.
Tal, this has been an immense pleasure. And talk about a bucket list item I can check off. Just this conversation alone, let's say that it's both created happiness and pleasure for me. This has been a lot of fun. This means a lot to me. I hope that, and not hope, but I know that it will have a profoundly positive impact on my listeners and my students as well. I can't thank you enough for giving your time today and being so generous. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Zach.
Before closing up today's show, I would love to ask for just a couple additional minutes of your time and attention to introduce you to one of my new favorite products created by my good friend Kit Perkins, who you may recognize as creator of the Topomat. Here is a brief excerpt from a recent interview that I did with Ergo-Driven co-founder and CEO Kit Perkins, talking about his latest product, New Standard Whole Protein.
I'm into health and fitness generally, but I want it to be simple and straightforward. About a year and a half ago, I started adding collagen into my protein shakes. And man, the benefits were like more dramatic than any supplement I've ever seen. So I thought, if I can just get this down to coming out of one jar, and it's ingredients that I know I can trust, and you just put it in water and you don't have to think about it.
When people think of protein powders, they think, well, I don't want to get big and bulky, and that's not what this is about. To me, this is about repair.
So a big part of what we're talking about here is you are what you eat. Your body's constantly repairing and rebuilding, and the only stuff it can use to repair and rebuild is what you've been eating. Unfortunately, as the years have gone by, every day getting out of bed, it's like, 2 or 3 creaks and pops in the first couple steps. And that I thought you just sort of live with now. But yeah, once starting the collagen daily or near daily, it's just gone. So for us, job 1A here was make sure it's high quality, and that's grass-fed, 100% pasture-raised cows. And then the second thing, if you're actually going to do it every day, it needs to be simple. It needs to taste good.
Well, my goal is that for anybody that is a creative professional like myself that's stuck in front of a computer, number one, they're doing it standing on a Topomat. Number two, they've got a glass of New Standard protein next to them so they can just fuel their body, fuel their brain. So you and I, my friend, one edit station at a time are going to change the world.
And even better for your listeners, with code OPTIMIZE, on either a one-time purchase or that first subscribe and save order, 50% off. So if you do that subscribe and save, that's 20% off and 50% off with code OPTIMIZE. That's a fantastic deal.
If you're looking for a simple and affordable way to stay energetic, focused, and alleviate the chronic aches and pains that come from living at your computer, I recommend New Standard Whole Protein because it's sourced from high-quality ingredients that I trust, and it tastes great. To place your first order, visit optimizeyourself.me/newstandard and use the code OPTIMIZE for 50% off your first order. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Optimize Yourself podcast. To access the show notes for this and all previous episodes, as well as to subscribe so you don't miss future interviews just like this one, please visit optimizeyourself.me/podcast. And don't forget that if you are inspired to take your networking game to a whole new level, but your outreach email game is just a bit weak, you get 100% free access to my new, improved, and upgraded Insider's Guide to Writing Amazing Outreach Emails, which is available for free to download at optimizeyourself.me/email guide. And lastly, a special thanks to our sponsors, Evercast and Ergo-Driven, for making today's interview possible. To learn more about how to collaborate remotely without missing a frame and get your real-time demo of Evercast in action, visit optimizeyourself.me/Evercast. And to learn more about Ergo-Driven and their brand new product that I am super excited about, New Standard Whole Protein, visit optimizeyourself.me/newstandard. If today's interview inspires you to take the next step towards a more fulfilling career path that not only aligns you with projects that you are passionate about, but also includes some semblance of work-life balance, and especially if you would like support, mentorship, and a community to help you turn your goals into a reality, then you and I need to talk. because in January, I'm opening winter enrollment for my Optimizer coaching and mentorship program, and it sounds like you could be the perfect fit. Over the last 3 years, I have now worked with well over 100 students, and I've seen stunning transformations. But the biggest obstacle for most has been that the program in the past was too expensive or it just required too much time. Those problems are no longer an issue, as I've made the program a lot more affordable and a lot less time intensive for those with busy lives, but who need an extra push to make whatever the next major transition is in your life. To learn more and apply, visit optimizeyourself.me/optimizer. Just so you know, I review applications in the order that they are received, and I fill slots accordingly. So the earlier that you apply, the better your chances are of getting in the program. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, healthy, and sane, and be well.